Hi, I'm Laci. And 6 weeks before my sister's wedding, she looked my husband in the face and said he didn't belong. Not in the photos, not in the speeches, not even in the invitation. I smiled like I always do. But something cracked. How many times can you be cut by family before you stop bleeding and start walking away? Before we dive in, have you ever felt like you were only loved when you stayed quiet? Let me know in the comments. The boutique smelled like lavender and steamed fabric. Light poured through tall windows onto silk gowns, illuminating dust in the air like soft confetti. Jody stood on a riser in the center of the room, arms spread, veil fluttering behind her like she'd been cast as the lead in a bridal commercial. Carol circled her, fluttering with compliments. I walked in holding Colby's hand. He offered a quiet smile and nodded to the bridal consultant. I squeezed his fingers once before letting go. He didn't belong here, not really, but he came anyway, because I asked him to, because he shows up when no one else would think to. Jody spun and smirked. Wearing black, Colby? You look like you're headed to a funeral, not a wedding. Laughter trickled out from Carol, soft and performative. I looked at Colby. He didn't flinch, just tugged the sleeve of his jacket like it had dust on it. I smiled because I always do. Because correcting her would turn a comment into a conflict, and I've learned to measure peace in swallowed words. They went back to fussing over necklines and centerpieces. I drifted behind them, smiling when spoken to, nodding at choices that would never include me. Then came the photos. Jody, bright and demanding. Group shots around the floral wall, she chirped. Colby stood still beside me, unsure where to go. Carol glanced at him and said, Let's keep it clean for the album. People who don't match the aesthetic should stay out of the pictures. We want everything cohesive. That word, cohesive. It landed heavier than the joke. It stuck. I didn't look at Colby, but I heard the shift in his breath. Then he said softly, I'll grab coffee. Text me if you need me. He was gone before I could say anything. Not mad, not dramatic, just gone. Jody didn't notice. Or maybe she did and didn't care. She posed, tilted her chin just so, laughed into her shoulder like the camera was her best friend. Carol fussed with her hair and whispered, My baby girl. I watched them from the edge of the mirror, my reflection cropped in the background. I wondered if I looked like I felt, quiet, blurry, unnecessary. A buzz in my pocket, a message from Colby. Got you your favorite with cinnamon. I looked up. Jody was laughing again, veil swinging. My mother was adjusting someone else's necklace, and I stood there thinking, how many times can someone be cut without a scar showing? The morning started with cold coffee and unread emails. I stood at the kitchen counter, half listening to the sound of Colby rinsing dishes behind me, when Jody's text lit up my screen. Need you for the next Sister's First podcast episode, just you though. No Colby this time. I stared at the message longer than I should have. It was simple, almost sweet, if you didn't know how she used punctuation like sugar on a poisoned pill. I tapped my phone against the counter and told myself what I always did. Colby doesn't like the spotlight anyway. He wouldn't mind, but I minded. I texted back, Sure, let me know the time. By Thursday, I was sitting across from Jody in her podcast studio. Whitewashed brick walls, neon sign that read, Her Side Always, a glossy pink mic pushed toward my mouth. Her assistant offered me lemon water with collagen powder. I said thank you and didn't drink it. We're talking about sisterhood today. Jody beamed at the camera, voice high and polished. How to keep bonds strong through life's transitions. I tried to smile. I talked about growing up sharing a bedroom, passing notes under doors, being the older sister who always made sure Jody had the last piece of gum. She laughed on cue. I wondered if she remembered any of it. During the break, Colby showed up with my favorite coffee, light roast with cinnamon and oat milk. He didn't come inside, just texted, I'm outside, no rush. I waved through the window. Jody's assistant leaned over and muttered, He doesn't say much, huh? I didn't respond. Silence isn't a flaw. We finished the episode. I left with a polite goodbye and walked straight past the ring light that made Jody look like she glowed from the inside. That night, curled up in bed, I opened Instagram and saw her story, a boomerang of her sipping from a gold mug. Text overlay. Hard to podcast when someone sits like a statue, so exhausting keeping things lively. No name, but she didn't need one. My chest tightened. I didn't show it to Colby. He was next to me reading, unaware that his stillness had become her punchline. I didn't comment. I didn't message. I didn't even screenshot. Instead, I opened the Notes app on my phone and started a list. Things that stung. Entry #1. Statue. By morning, the story had 4,036 views. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the number, then whispered into the quiet room, "You're not telling the story right, Jody." But I will. 2 summers ago, we had a barbecue in my parents' backyard. It was one of those humid July afternoons where the lemonade always tasted sweeter than it should have, and the grill smoke clung to your clothes long after you left. It was also the day Jody announced her engagement, standing on the deck, holding up her hand like it was a winning lottery ticket. That day, we took a group photo. I remember pulling Colby into the frame. He resisted at first, but I insisted. "You're part of this too," I told him. He stood next to Jody, unsure where to put his arms. Jody offered a smile, but it was more grimace than gratitude. Now, months later, I sat in the dining room of my parents' home, staring at a printed guest seating chart spread out on the table. Jody tapped a pencil against her cheek, humming. "Should we put Colby near the family table?" I asked. My voice was soft, but clear. Jody didn't look up. "He doesn't really know anyone. Don't force it. It's weird." The silence after was louder than anything else. Carol adjusted her glasses. Dennis changed the subject. I nodded like that made sense. Then, like muscle memory, I opened the note on my phone. Things that stung. Entry #3. Don't force it. Afterward, I walked Colby to the car. He unlocked it, slid into the driver's seat, then looked over at me. "You don't have to keep dragging me into places I'm clearly not welcome," he said. I wanted to argue, to say she didn't mean it. But we both knew better. He wasn't angry, just tired. And I wasn't just his wife anymore. I was his shield, his translator, his excuse for being anywhere they were. 2 days later, I was scrolling through Instagram during a slow lunch hour when I saw it. Jody had posted the photo. The same one from the rehearsal dinner. Everyone lined up under the patio lights, laughing, arms slung over shoulders. Everyone but Colby. He had been standing right beside me, but now he wasn't. He'd been cropped, cleanly, strategically. "Beautiful family," one comment read. "Where's your sister's husband?" another asked. I didn't comment, didn't screenshot, just stared. Then I opened my gallery and deleted the original photo, not out of spite, out of surrender. That evening, as Colby watered the plants outside, my phone buzzed, a message from an old friend who followed Jody. "Hey, is everything okay between Colby and your family?" Something felt off. I looked out the window at him in his old t-shirt, sleeves damp, carefully pouring into a terracotta pot like it mattered. "You have no idea how off," I whispered. The email came at 9:12 p.m., subject line, "Wedding speech draft, need your thoughts." I opened it while sitting in my home office, a cup of untouched tea going cold beside my laptop. The document loaded slowly, like it already knew what was about to unfold. The draft was full of Jody's usual sparkle, references to her favorite rom-coms, inside jokes with old college friends, a paragraph praising Mom for teaching her what love looks like. Then came the part titled, "Thank yous." My eyes locked on a single line. "To my sister Laci and her friend for helping us stay on budget and for being there." I didn't even blink. I reread it 3 times. Not because I didn't understand it, because I did. Friend. When did my husband become an accessory to edit down for word count? A placeholder with no name, no weight, no space? I didn't reply. Didn't correct it. I highlighted the sentence, let it glow yellow on my screen, and closed the document. Then I sat there in silence so full it felt like it had shape. The next day, I called her. Not out of anger, curiosity maybe, or the need to pretend there was still a version of us that could talk like sisters. "Hey, got your speech draft," I said. She laughed. "Oh, you liked it?" "There's a part I wanted to ask about," I said. "The thank you section." She cut me off. "Oh, that. I figured naming everyone would make it too long. Plus, Colby's great, but not everyone gets his vibe, you know? He'd probably rather not be mentioned. I clenched my jaw. They don't get his vibe, I said, because they've never stayed long enough to see it. Jody didn't respond, just said she'd talk to Mom about trimming another paragraph. That night, I printed the speech, circled the words "her friend" in red. Then, on a blank index card, I wrote, Colby, husband, human, not optional. I folded it and slid it into my wallet, not as a threat, as a reminder. Later that evening, just as I was brushing my teeth, another text arrived. Hey, think you can help me trim the part about Mom? It feels a little long. I didn't answer. I placed the printed draft back in the envelope, pressed it shut with the side of my hand, and whispered, to no one, I'm done trimming what matters just to make you comfortable. Carol's house always smelled like lemon cleaner and something slightly burnt. Sunday night dinners were routine now, expected, not requested. I brought wine because it kept me from clenching my teeth when the conversation veered, as it always did. Jody was already mid-monologue about seating charts and napkin textures when we walked in. Colby nodded a greeting. Dennis offered him a grunt. Carol kissed my cheek and then adjusted the thermostat, as if that were more pressing than saying hello to the man I married. We sat down. I helped pass dishes. Colby made a light comment about weather delays in Denver and how they might affect Jody's honeymoon flights. Carol smiled, nodded once, then turned to Jody and said, Maybe we should do your trial makeup before the next rehearsal. The lighting at the venue is tricky. Just like that, he disappeared, still sitting at the table, but already gone. After dinner, as I pulled on my coat, Carol followed me out to the driveway. The air was cool. My breath showed. She touched my elbow gently. Laci, Colby is sweet, really, but he just doesn't quite fit in with our family. She said it like a kindness, like I should thank her for putting it so delicately. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. He fits with me, I said quietly. Isn't that enough? She didn't answer, just patted my arm like I was the one who needed consoling and changed the subject to weather. 2 days later, Jody texted, Bridal planning night tomorrow at Mom's, just us girls. Maybe just come alone, sweetie. I read it once, then again. I typed, we'll see, then deleted it. I texted Colby instead. Dinner out, just the two of us tomorrow? That night, I pulled out an old journal. One entry was from the first few months we dated. I'd written, he makes things quiet in a good way. Another read, Mom said I haven't looked this peaceful in years. I shut the journal and stared at the ceiling. Now, the same people treated him like a noise that didn't match their song. They liked me better when I was hurting and agreeable. Over pasta and wine the next evening, Colby twirled spaghetti around his fork and asked, almost gently, Was I supposed to stay quiet so they'd like me? I looked at him, then down at my plate, untouched, cooling fast. No, I said, then softer, barely above a whisper. But maybe I was. The table was set for 3. I noticed it the moment we walked into the dining room, white plates with gold rims, cloth napkins folded into little fans, and only 3 chairs around the table. Carol's, Jody's, and mine, not Colby's. He paused in the doorway, pretending not to notice. I walked to the corner and quietly pulled a 4th chair from the wall. It scraped against the tile. No one offered to help. Jody smiled, breezy and loud, pouring sparkling water into stemless glasses. Pre-wedding bonding, she announced. Just us girls. Plus the loyal sidekick, she added with a wink in Colby's direction. He smiled politely and took the chair I'd placed for him. During lunch, the topic drifted from flower vendors to family heirlooms. Jody jabbed her fork into a cherry tomato and said, I just think things should stay within the bloodline, you know? Like, real family stuff should go to real family. Carol nodded, slow and thoughtful like she was co-signing a law. Dennis looked at his watch and offered nothing. I looked across the table. Jody was already lifting her water glass. So Colby doesn't count? I asked. She shrugged. You know what I mean? I didn't respond. Not out loud. But inside, I felt something slide out of place. Quietly. Finally. We ate the rest of the meal in scattered conversation. Afterward, I helped clear the table while Jody talked about her rehearsal dinner playlist. As she rinsed a plate, she said, like it was casual, like it meant nothing. I'm just glad it's still the three of us. You, me, and Mom. That's family. Colby was in the hallway sorting through coats on the rack. He heard her. I saw the stillness in his hands. That night, he folded laundry without turning on music like he usually did. He looked up once and said, "I didn't think I had to earn a seat at your family table." I didn't have an answer. Only 1,000 memories crashing through my ribs like glass. Later, I dug out an old photo from the guest room drawer, me and Jody on the porch, probably 7 and 12. Our knees scraped, our arms around each other like we believed in always. On the back, in Carol's handwriting, "My girls, forever connected." I held the picture and whispered, "Forever's only real if it grows to include more." Then I picked up my phone and sent Jody a single message. "Do not ever say who my family is again." I didn't wait for a reply. The voicemail came in while I was making coffee. The machine hummed in the background, the smell of dark roast curling around me like a blanket I wasn't sure I wanted. Carol's voice, sweet like canned peaches. "You're confusing love with control, Laci. Don't let money turn you into someone bitter." I didn't breathe until she finished. Then I played it again. I gripped the coffee mug harder with each replay. The rim tapped against my teeth once. That part I remember clearly, how I nearly bit down. So now I was the one with the problem. Not the people who erased my husband from their table, not the sister who sliced names out of sentences. Me. I stared out the kitchen window at the hydrangeas Colby planted last spring. They hadn't bloomed this year. Maybe they knew. Around noon, a new text popped up. "Thought you'd find this helpful." A link. Medium article. "Stop controlling people with money. How financial abuse hides behind gifts." I read the headline 3 times before I opened it, then read the entire thing out of spite. Paragraph after paragraph described people like me, or at least the version of me they had decided I was, the one who gives to feel powerful, the one who expects something in return, the one who uses generosity as a leash. When I reached the last sentence, I deleted it. Not the message, just the article. But the sting clung. I walked to the bookshelf in the corner of the living room, pulled out the file where I kept records of all the wedding contributions, vendor receipts, bank transfers, even the deposit for the Maldives trip. Thousands of dollars. Moments of trust. I whispered aloud, not to defend myself, but to remember. That wasn't control. That was love. That was faith. I sat down and opened my laptop, started drafting an email. "If you believe I'm manipulative, then keep your distance. And keep your gifts too." I saved it to drafts. Didn't send it. That evening, Colby found me standing by the living room window, arms crossed tight against my chest. He didn't ask what was wrong. He already knew. Instead, he asked quietly, "Do they know what they're asking you to give up?" I turned to face him. "They want me quiet," I said. "That's what they always wanted, but this time, silence would be betrayal." He nodded, just once, then went to start dinner. We didn't need words for the rest of the evening. Later, I reopened the draft, changed the subject line, "Control," and hit send. The house was still. Dinner dishes had been rinsed and stacked. Colby sat in the living room, folding a blanket with the same quiet care he gave everything. I leaned against the counter, phone in hand, listening to Jody's voice fill the space. "We were really counting on the Maldives thing, but I get it. Still, you're doing well, right?" There was no tremble in her tone, no pause to suggest hesitation. It was just another item on her list of expectations, recited as casually as a weather update. My thumb hovered over the screen. No reply. Just breath I didn't know I was holding. Not a sorry, not a single acknowledgement. I opened my laptop. The login screen blinked back at me, like it was waiting for permission. I navigated to the travel portal, clicked cancel. The Maldives trip disappeared with one click. Confirmation, full refund issued. Colby looked up when he heard the click of the lid closing. "That was the last thing I was holding on to," I said, quieter than I meant. He nodded once. No celebration, just release. Like 2 people watching the tide finally recede, after holding back a flood that never stopped coming. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. "Jody, Mom said you're starting that financial coaching firm. You've got room for another gift, yeah?" I didn't reply. I forwarded the message to myself, let it sit in my inbox for a second, and then deleted the thread. I had never known entitlement could sound that warm. 2 days later, we crossed paths at her dress fitting. I asked about the wedding invitations, gently, like someone still pretending to be civil. You left out Colby's name. Was that on purpose? Jody didn't even blink. She looked me straight in the eye, lips barely parted before she said it. He's not really family. The silence that followed didn't just fill the room, it cracked it. Even the tailor stepped back like he felt it in the floorboards. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just picked up my bag and said, "Neither are you anymore." No one followed me out. Back home, I opened the drawer where I'd tucked the itinerary, printed on thick cardstock, wrapped with a gold ribbon. I unfolded it once, read it over, then I fed it into the shredder. It wasn't just about the trip, it never was. That night, Colby found a note taped to the fridge. You don't owe love to people who only see your worth when you're giving. He turned to me, question resting quietly in his eyes. I'm ready to stop apologizing for walking away, I said. The kitchen was quiet, not heavy, not tense, just quiet, the way early mornings in late October tend to be. Colby and I sat across from each other at the table, both holding mugs we hadn't yet sipped from. His had gone lukewarm, mine had gone cold. There were no messages waiting, no missed calls, no new invitations. When I opened the group chat Jody had created for the wedding, I wasn't in it anymore. Just like that, the thread was gone. And for the first time in weeks, my chest didn't tighten. It just settled. Tammy called around noon. She said she went to the wedding, just to see, not to participate. She described Carol's speech in that familiar clipped tone of hers. Some people confuse financial gifts with love. Real family is about showing up. I closed my eyes, listening to the words secondhand. They still stung. But the sharp edge dulled when Tammy added softly, "But you did show up, for years, and they ignored it." I didn't cry. I thanked her. We talked about books for a while. Then we didn't say goodbye. We just let the call end. That afternoon, Colby handed me a small gray album with a soft leather cover. "For you," he said, sitting beside me. Inside was a single photo on the first page. The two of us in Colorado, standing at the edge of a cliff trail, hair windblown, smiling like the world had narrowed into just us. Below it, in his handwriting, family, defined by choice. I traced the curve of the letters with my thumb, then placed the album beside our wedding photo on the shelf. Later that evening, I sat at my desk and pulled out a piece of thick paper, the kind you use for things you never intend to throw away. I wrote the letter in one sitting. You didn't fail. You waited too long, but you didn't fail. You saw the pattern. You stepped away. They didn't break you. They never even noticed how strong you had to be. I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and wrote on the front, "Do not send, just remember." We left for the mountains that weekend. No itinerary, no family calls to check in, no cameras, no dresses, no speeches, just silence and road and space. When we reached the cabin, Colby parked and turned off the engine. The forest around us was thick with late autumn gold. Leaves skittered across the windshield. I turned to him and said, "This time, let's make memories no one can crop out." He smiled without saying anything. Some stories don't need rewriting, just a new ending. Sometimes the deepest pain doesn't come from being forgotten. It comes from being remembered only when it's convenient. I learned that love without respect is just a transaction waiting to expire. And silence isn't always strength. Sometimes it's surrender. This time, I chose differently. If you've ever been made to feel like a guest in your own family, I hope this story reminds you. You are allowed to choose peace over performance. You are allowed to walk away. What about you? Have you ever had to redefine what family means to you? I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. If this video moved you or made you reflect, comment 1 or tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if it didn't speak to you, I'd still love to know why. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. There are more stories coming, raw, real, and always human.